We all know that language, and therefore words, carry power. We just see that from the fact that it's the key to communication, the communication of our feelings to one another, whether it's from the earliest our childhood, formative years, communication of love, also unfortunately the communication of anger. So words carry power. They carry our expression, they carry our intentions, they carry our personality, our passion, our emotions, and so on. And words are made up of letters. No business can function without a mission statement. Can you? I created a special course, Discover Your Personal Mission Statement. Check it out in the description below. And very often, though we use this tool at our disposal all the time, it's called communicating, speaking, crying, singing, all the different forms of expression of words, whether it's through speaking or also through writing, which is also words. We don't often pay attention to the exact science and art that lies behind these words. So in truth is the discussion of numerology, or the Hebrew word Gematria, which comes from a Greek Gematria, which is geometry. Essentially it's the study of numbers. But Gematria particularly refers to the power and the energy that lies in the numbers that correspond to each letter, which I shall soon explain. But I think it's important to first discuss what letters and words are in general. Because I said, though we use words all the time, as I'm doing right now, and we use them hopefully for good purposes, but we also sometimes use them for unhealthy purposes, destructive ones, we have to realize that words are energy. Words are energy. As a matter of fact, the word for words in Hebrew, which is a milah, is made up of oisius. Words are made up of letters. Every word is made up of letters. And the word ois in Hebrew comes from the word asa boiker. And the morning has arrived, has risen, the dawn has risen. The morning has arrived. So ois refers to an arrival, what we call a transmission. It's a transmission of energy. So though a letter on its own is hollow, you just have an A, a B, a C, a D, but if you combine the letters, let's say you combine the letter G-O-O-D, it takes on a whole different meaning more than the sum of the parts, because each of the letters has its particular energy, and combining them creates a new energy, a new synergy, you can say, which conveys the feelings that are conveyed when you say the word good. Now, it's important also to point out that I'm going to be speaking primarily about Hebrew language, because that's where Gematria really plays a tremendous role. And one of the reasons for that is because, according to Jewish mysticism, the Hebrew language is actually the original of all languages. And there are actually books that describe how all languages evolved and originated from its original Hebrew. That's why you have Aleph, Bet, A, B, and you have the equivalent in not only in Latin languages, also in other languages, that it all originates from Hebrew. And Hebrew is considered to be the pure language, the language of metaphor, the language that the divine used to create existence. And thus the language, the letters and the words take on a whole different dimension, because what they are doing is actually conveying the power that lies, the power of creation, the power of the force of creation that lies within each thing that's named by a certain word or combination of words, which is why we say, for example, when we ask for a refuah shlema, for a blessing for health for someone who's been ill, we look for their name and their Hebrew name and their mother's Hebrew name. Why Hebrew name? Because the Hebrew name is seen as the name that channels the soul's power into our beings. And therefore that Hebrew name carries a particular power. Now we're not going to just be talking about names here and about letters, but I need to begin with that because that's an introduction to understand the significance of the Gematria within those letters. So to sum up, let's put it this way. Think of letters, think of it this way. We use an analogy. You have a film projector that's projecting just plain white light on a screen. So you see nothing, all you see is white light. Now imagine you take a film which has carved out images. In this case, let's say carved out letters, not carved out, a film with letters in it, and then you put that in front of the projector, what will happen? The letters will now be projected letters of light. So if you have carved out letters, as I said, G-O-O-D, Or we'll use a Hebrew word, baruch, which is a very classic word which means to bless. Beis, Reish, Vav, Chaf, it's 4 Hebrew letters. So you'll see those letters of light are projected onto the screen. Now what's actually happened here? What's happened here is that the white light is just plain seamless and shapeless energy, without shape and form. And the film, or if they're cut out letters like we used to use in school and so on, then the film and those cut out letters will so-called channel the energy, the white light, onto the screen, and therefore you'll have now letters of light. This is how we see names and we see words in general. They're essentially channeling energy. As I said at the outset, when someone speaks to you, and I'm trying to stay away from superficial talk and gossip and nonsense. Let's talk about something significant. Someone shares with you important words. The words I love you, or the words I care about you, or other words that we use to communicate with our hearts and with our minds to others. So those words are particular sentiments, but they carry a white energy. They carry the white, shapeless energy, but they're being shaped by the letters that we use, which is why words have so much impact and so much potency, because the words we use is not just the passion. Now, obviously, if you say words and you don't say them with a soul, you don't say them with a heart, you don't say them in a way you care, then it's like words that, as I said, hollow words. But if you combine both together, you combine the passion and the energy of a feeling, the sentiment that comes with the energy. You say it with gusto. You say it with a passion. Then that passion, like the white light, is channeled through the letters, and in turn you have an expression that will convey a feeling, sometimes a very strong feeling, an intense feeling. So good communication, as you see, will be not just choosing the right words, but also choosing the right inflections and emphasis that the speaker uses in communicating. Now, when you write, you don't quite have the same power of communicating passion, so that's why good writers know how to use the right words that trigger the same type of emotions, and certain words and the way they're phrased and the way they're punctuated will convey the same idea. An exclamation point, for example, will convey something that's an exclamation. Something, a question mark, will focus on something that is mysterious or unknown or questionable or still cryptic. And the same with other punctuation marks. So basically language is essentially, we'll call it energy and containers. The energy is the white light, and the containers are the particular letters you use to communicate the particular message. So everything in life has those two elements. There's energy, but the energy needs to be harnessed and channeled. And hence, that's how we see letters. So letters essentially are channelers of light, channelers of energy. And when you think about it, it really becomes also, as an aside, an incredible point of understanding the importance of the words we use, the care that we should take. You'll see intelligent people are very careful what they say, what they don't say. Sometimes you can learn more from someone what they don't say from what they do say. In other words, the idea of being measured, knowing when to say it, how to say it, speaking in a pleasant tone, the divrei chacham benachas nishman that we're told, which means the words of the wise is said with a certain pleasantness and a certain measured tone. They don't speak in ways that are incoherent or overly passionate or overly extreme. Everything is said in a calm way. And the people who are not in control of themselves can go into tantrums, yell, scream, hysterical, and their words come across in that fashion. So words are really just channels and instruments for us to reach to each other. And in doing so, we have, as I said, the energy of the word or the letter. Let's speak about letters which make up words, and the message of the words. So if you think of it in a book, the letters on the page are like the containers, and the energy is the message. What's the story? What's the narrative? What's the sentiment? What's the experience that's being conveyed? And in a world like ours, where we live in a material world, we need both. You cannot just have energy without containers, because then we won't be able to reach each other. If someone just pours out their plain, unfiltered, and shapeless energy, you won't understand what they're saying. It'll just be sound. If, on the other hand, there's only letters and there's no soul behind it, then it's just empty words. And that's why we need both. We need, as they say, words from the heart enter the heart. So it comes from the heart, and the heart is beyond words, but then it's harnessed and channeled in expression. Sometimes there's an expression that I like to believe that when I try to write and communicate, you're really trying to express the inexpressible. That's really what it comes down to. You're trying to express feelings and sentiments and experiences that are not always easy to quantify in words. And so therefore you have to use the right metaphors and the right analogies. And most importantly, you need to find those words that resonate with you and with another. And that resonance is really where you create the connection. But you can only do it through words, because if you don't have the words, you don't have the channel, you don't have the bridge. The bridge is a good word here. The bridge to bridge two people. But what are you using on this? What are you conveying on this bridge? What's traveling across this bridge, however, are feelings and sentiments that are sometimes not exactly described and can fit into the regular parameters of words. Which is why often one of the ways we communicate is through song. You sometimes can't communicate it through exact prose or particular rational words or language. So we use a song, or we use a feeling, or we use an expression. People relate to the word oy vey. I think everybody understands what that means, even though it doesn't have any particular meaning in the dictionary. Or a cry, or a laugh. So the point I'm making here is I'm trying to explain the so-called the science behind language, behind linguistics. And the science really is that there's an energy and there are containers. So this introduction is critical to really understand the mystery of the Gematria. So let's go over to the Gematria now. So if words are energy, if letters are energy, and words are the synergy of several letters coming together, and I'll use the classic, as I said, the Hebrew word baruch is the best example, because baruch means blessing. Baruch atah, you are blessed, you shall be blessed. So the word baruch is made up of 4 Hebrew letters, beis, resh, vav, and chav. If you want to use the word in English, bless, let's say bless or blessing, B-L-E-S-S. But as I said, I'm focusing on the Hebrew, but I'll explain it all obviously in English. So this is an example of using language to explain something that may be beyond some people's language, because not everybody knows Hebrew. So the word baruch or bless is made up of letters, and the letters themselves, the B, for example, of bless could be a B in other words. It could be the B of building. It could be the B of bricks. It could be the B of a bumblebee, if you wish. So that B can be used in many different ways. It's just a brick. Think of a brick in a building. But then when that brick, that one letter combines with another letter, an L, which again is a letter that can be used in many words, and an E, and an S, or beis, resh, vav, chaf, which can be used in many different combinations. Now that you combine them in this particular order, you have suddenly a new energy enters, what we call synergy. It's more than the sum of the parts. It's not just a B and an L and an E and an SS. It's not just a beis, a resh, a vav, and a chaf. It is now the meaning blessing. Blessing, we all know, is much more than just 4 letters, random letters. Now the letters, the bricks have come together and have shaped a message, have shaped a feeling. Someone says, I want to bless you. It's a lot more than just a bunch of letters. They're giving you a blessing. They're giving you a bracha, a blessing. And the same thing with says, I love you, L-O-V-E. The love word in Hebrew, love is ahava, also 4 letters, aleph, hey, vav, hey. So this again conveys much more than just single bricks. These bricks have now turned into a structure, and that structure is the word that conveys a message that's more than the sum of the parts. But it's made up of those parts. So you have to say those parts all have their energy. Then there's a synergy that enters what is often called the in Hebrew, in the Kabbalistic language, ha'el al kulana, a type of synergy that hovers and is more than the sum of the letters, which is the word. Now, of course, that's one word. When you combine several words, you create a sentence. And sentences create paragraphs, and paragraphs create chapters, and chapters create books, and books create volumes. And there you have the whole story of, the rest is history. The point is that it all begins with these letters. And whether it's letters of speech or the written word, it's the same idea. It's just 2 different forms of letters. One is coming out of your mouth, and one is being engraved or written on paper or on parchment, or engraved in a tablet. And what I mean by tablet, I don't mean the modern tablet. I mean the tablets as they were given at Sinai, such tablets. So once you understand language and letters in that fashion, now the interesting thing is, if a letter is indeed a channeler of energy, then this letter has to be analyzed and dissected. So here we have several ways we look at letters. Besides the fact that the letters add up to a word, the letters also have a shape. every letter has a shape. An aleph, for example, is a diagonal line with a dot on the right side and on top right and a dot on the bottom left. A beis is three lines with an open left side, like a square without the left side of the square. A gimel is harder to describe. It's a line with but each Hebrew letter has its shape. And that shape indeed also, as I said before with the film and the projector, the shape of letters is what shapes the energy, follow that shape. So the shape itself carries and describes that kind of energy it is. So let's take the word beis as a matter of fact. The word beis has another meaning. Beis also is a bayit. If you know a little Hebrew, you know that bayit is a house. And a beis actually looks like a house. What does a house usually look like? You make three lines and that's a house, right? A wall, and a roof. That's a beis, an inverted beis. And the same thing with aleph and the same thing with gimel. So besides the fact that the letter itself makes up the word bayit, the shape of the letter contains the energy of that letter. So now we have the shapes. Then we have the meanings of each letter. Like I just said, beis is also a house. Aleph can mean master. Aleph can mean teacher. So aleph has many of its own meanings, and the same thing, each of the letters has its meaning. What we're going to focus on here is a third element in each letter, is its numerical equivalent, which we'll be calling numerology. That's the Gematria. So what's a Gematria? A Gematria literally means the number that corresponds to the letters of the alphabet, of the Hebrew alphabet. So we have a system for this. It's actually quite complex. I'm going to focus on the basics. Even though we call this Gematria for beginners, I was wondering whether to use that word. I'll tell you why, just as an aside. I remember I was once giving a series of classes at the Open Center here in the city. It was on Spring Street when I was teaching then. Then they moved somewhere in midtown. And I gave a number of classes there. And one of the classes, the program director called me. She was really good with the titles and so on. She said, let's do a class called Kabbalah for Beginners. So I told her, I don't know if that's a great title. Who wants to be called? No one likes to be called a beginner. So she said to me, they said the same thing about those books, like, accounting for dummies, computers for dummies, this for dummies, that for dummies. And first people thought maybe it won't work. No one wants to be called a dummy. But the tongue-in-cheek element, actually saying it in the people's face, actually did resonate. They said, no problem. Once you're telling me I'm a dummy, at least you're not hiding the fact. So it worked. It was a good marketing tool. Then became a series for idiots, right? Something like that, cooking for idiots and accounting for idiots. I'm not sure what the difference between an idiot and a dummy is, but two brands. So we have an idiot and dummy brand. Okay, now, this was all, so I said to her, I don't know if it's a great idea to call Kabbalah for beginners. She said, let's try. And we did it. Around, I recall, 30, 35 people attended. Then the series was very nice, successful. It was recorded. I think we even have it on, make it available on our site. Then a few months later, she said, let's do another one. So I said, let's try advanced Kabbalah. We did the beginners, let's do advanced Kabbalah. She says, what are you going to say? I said, I'm going to say the same thing, but let's call it advanced Kabbalah. We had over 100 people showed up. So I said, you see, I think maybe when it comes to cooking for dummies, they don't have a problem. But for Kabbalah, everyone wants the advanced version. They don't want the beginner's version. So I was thinking about the Gematria for beginners. So I said, let's test it as well. We'll do Gematria for beginners this week. And some other point, we'll do advanced Gematria. The truth is, it's all advanced, to be very honest. And even for advanced people, you also have to begin with the beginning and begin with the basics. So don't be deceived by the name. And we didn't call it Gematria for dummies. And we didn't call it Gematria for idiots. That's not the Meaningful Life Center style. But Gematria for beginners, the art and science of Jewish numerology. So the truth is, it is a very complex study, to be honest, because in Gematria itself, and I'll point it out in this discussion, there's probably, I would say, 30 different ways of doing a Gematria. How do you like that? So I'm going to begin with the most basic way, and that is that in the Hebrew alphabet, there are 22 letters. 22 letters and 5 what we'll call, what are they called? Vowels, not vowels. No. 5 letters that have a double letter that you use at the end of a word, which is Mem, Nun, Tzadik, Pei, Chof. So it's really 22 letters, but I'm not going to discuss the other 5 because they'll just complicate matters. Let's stick to the 22. So based on what I've said, Ois and Os is Eis Asa Boiker. Asa Boiker. So Os comes from the word transmission, channeling, directing, guiding light, right? So based on that, it's like 22, think of it, 22 of transmissions. Each one with its own particular personality, its own shape, its own meaning, and of course its own number, which is what we're focusing on. And the general way it's structured goes like this. The first 10 letters are 1 to 10. So you have Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Ches, Tes, Yud is 1 to 10, with Aleph being number 1. Beis is 2, Gimel is 3, Dalet is 4, and Yud is 10. Then it jumps by tens. So you have the next is 10, 20, 30. You don't go by units any longer, we go by tens. So Yud till Kuf would be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. I'll be specific, I'll spell it out in case somebody wants. I'll start again. Aleph is 1, Beis is 2, Gimel is 3, Dalet is 4, Hey is 5, Vav is 6, Zayin is 7, Ches is 8, and Tes is 9, and Yud is 10. So we got the first 10 letters. We have another 12 to go. And here's how it works. The next is Chaf. So Yud is 10, Chaf is 20, Lamed is 30, Mem is 40, Nun is 50, Samach is 60, Ayin is 70, Pei is 80, Tzadik is 90, and Kuf is 100. So now we have 20 letters. Well, 19 I should say. And then we have Reish, Shin, Tov, the last 3. And now it jumps to hundreds. So now we went 10 units, then we went 10 tens, and now we go from Kuf is 100, Reish is 200, Shin is 300, and Tov, the final of the 22 letters, is 400. So let's take any word let's take the word Baruch as I mentioned. So what would be the Gematria of Baruch? The Beis is 2, the Reish is 200, the Vav is 6, so we have 208, and the Chaf is 20, so we have 228. Take any name. Let's take a name. Anyone has a Hebrew name here? Tell me your Hebrew name. Adina. Adina? Yeah. Okay. You spell with an Aleph at the end, or a Hey?
I think it's...
probably a Hey.
Aleph, yeah.
Aleph, Dalet, Yun, Nun,
Yes.
Hey?
Yeah.
Okay. So Aleph, Dalet, Yun has 5 letters. So Aleph is 1. With Dalet, that makes it 5. Dalet is 4. Yud is so then we have 10, 15. Nun is 50, 65. And the final Hey is 70. So your name is the Gematria number 70. So 70 has special meaning relating to your name. Every word has a Gematria based on the combination of the letters. Now I've just given you one form of Gematria. There are many other ways to do these calculations, but I said that will be more complicated. So let's just focus on this, we'll call it the basic Gematria of a word. Remember, there are other ways that the letters are counted. Sometimes we count the letters and we don't skip tens and hundreds, and it goes literally 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 till 22, with Tav being 22. Sometimes we don't count zeros, which means that we can have number 1 is Aleph, Yud is 1 because you take out the 0, Chaf is 2, Kuf would be also 1 because you take out the 2 zeros. So essentially you would have 4 times the letter 1, Aleph, Kuf, Chaf, and Kuf 3 times. And Beis would be 2, 220, and 200. And Gimel would be 3, would be Gimel, Shin, and Gimel, Lamed, and Shin. So I'm just pointing out there are many other ways to count. Then there's all kinds of other types of Gematrias where you actually add up the letters in a cumulative way. For example, Adina, you would say 1, then you'd say 1 and 4 is 5, but you add now the 5, you count the 1 again. So you say 5 and 1 is 6. Then you count the Yud and the Aleph and the Dalet, so it would be 6. 10 plus 5 is 15. And you add it up and it comes out to be a lot more than 70. So there are different ways. Sometimes you cube it, sometimes you even quadruple it. And there's sometimes I call it koil, you add the whole word and then you add one more number for the sum total of them all. I don't want to confuse matters. I just wanted to point out that there are a lot of complex configurations and permutations of these ideas. One classic thing that you may be familiar with, this is more Kabbalistic, but I'll just mention it for the record, the famous Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Tetragrammaton, the holiest name of God. So everyone knows that's associated with the number 26. Yud is 10, the Hey is 5, 15, The vav is 6, so that's 1521 plus one more. Hey, 5 makes 26. But there's a thing called counting there's another form of gematria called with the milui. So if you've ever heard of the concept of l'shem ma, the name of ma, the name of ban, the name of sag, the name of ab, if you haven't, you can easily skip this. It won't affect the rest of the discussion here. But these are 4 different numerical gematrias, all based on the Yud Kei Vav Kei. And I'll explain that in a moment, because 26 is the basic number of the 4 letters. But what happens when you write out the 4 letters? A Yud, when you write it out, it itself is made up of 3 letters. Yud, Vav, Daled. So suddenly the Yud becomes 20. Because the Yud is 10, the Vav is 6, and then 4, so 10 and 10, 20. Now the question is, how do you write Hey? That's why I asked you the question. You could write Hey Aleph, you could write Hey Hey, you could write Hey Yud. So all these show different permutation of these letters, and they add up respectively to 4 different ways of combining them. One adds up to 45, one adds up to 52, one adds up to 63, and one adds up to 72. So you'll find sometimes in Kabbalistic and Hasidic writings these names. As I said, this is more of a footnote. I just wanted to point out how this affects literally all discussions about words and names and numbers and so on. And they're all the different types of gematrias. But let's get back to the basic. Because if you master the basic gematria, it's much easier, obviously, to climb to stage 2 and figure out other forms of numerical configurations. Another introduction I want to make before I continue is that a gematria also helps understand the connections between different things. Let's say your name Adina adds up to number 70. There are other words in Hebrew that add up to number 70. And they have a relationship because they have the same gematria. But the qualification I want to make here is that a lot of people who are probably more novices and don't know the entire science and art of it, just go ahead and start comparing different things that are number 70 and say, okay, this is number 70, this is number 70, and therefore we can just make a correlation. It's not the case. It goes the other way around. Because 2 things are connected, that's why their numbers are going to be connected. Not that you find 2 things of the same number, you can just stick one wall to the next, as they say. We can't just stick walls together. You have to understand, firstly, the significance of a name or the meaning of the word. Then you could say that relates to another word, because they have, the classic example would be the number, another 70, happens to be 70, is this expression, nichnas yayin yatsa soid. Okay? It says when wine enters, the secrets come out. As we see, someone drinks wine, they start, they like to say, a drunk, what's on their lung is on their tongue. In Yiddish, there's an expression, was ist auf dem Lung ist auf dem Zung. But it also has a positive meaning, that when you drink wine, your inner dimension is revealed. Just like the grape has concealed within it wine, so too, and when you squeeze the grape, that wine is produced. So too, we all have inner secrets, more deeper things, and when you drink wine, it brings the secret out. So the interesting thing is the gematria of yayin, which is wine, is what? Is 70. The gematria of soid, secret, is also 70. Because yayin is yud, yud, nun. Yud is 10, another 10 is yud, nun is 50, that's 70. Sod is samach is 60, vav is 6, and dalet is 4, 70. It's different words. So the words themselves, if you saw yayin here, wine, secret here, you wouldn't necessarily connect them. But based on this Talmudic statement, you realize they both carry the power of a secret. And therefore, they have the same number. So it didn't begin because they both have the same number, it was because they had a relationship. Therefore, it's the way the cosmic energies work, that's why they have the same number. So it's important to realize it's not the number that makes the connection, it's the connection that makes the number. That's a critical piece in understanding what gematrias are. And avoids a lot of mistakes that people make. They start looking around, okay, what else is number 70? And okay, I must have a connection to that. You see, let's say 75th Avenue, that's the place I have to go shopping. Not necessarily. That's a little going overboard. Because first you need a connection, then you need the numerical equivalent of it. Okay. So with that said, you suddenly see a new horizons and completely new vistas and horizons open up when you start looking at the number of words. Here, right here. Yayin means wine. Sod means secret. But when you look at the gematria, you suddenly realize that you can learn deep things about wine and about secrets by looking at the number. And the same is true across the board with every name of either a person or of an object or of anything in existence. The name carries the energy as I described in the introduction, and that energy, part of that energy is also the numerical, the equivalent, the numerology of that word or name. Now, one has to be careful because not everyone's a master of this, but there were Kabbalists and mystics who were able to look at someone's name and able to somewhat recognize certain patterns and personality that that person has. And we're not talking here any prophecy or miracles. It's simply because the name carries energy. And a name carries energy, means it's your energy. It's the name that you were given, which we told the Arizal. The writings of the Arizal was a great mystic who says that when parents give a name to children, it's like a mini prophecy. They may not know it, but God puts the right name in their mouths, which is why one of the only areas where you don't have rabbis and leaders will advise on a name, you'll never find advice in a name. You'll see the names in the Bible, for example. Leah gave the names. The parents give the names. Even though you can go, let's say, to a sage and say, what name do you think? The sage will always say, you as parents have the prophecy, the mini prophecy. God will give you the right name to put into the right name that this child needs to have. Now, sometimes it's a name after a grandparent, after a loved one, after someone that you want to remember and memorialize. That's part of it. But a name is a very powerful force. And we see, even though on one hand a name you can say is only a handle, you can exist without a name. If you lived alone on this earth, you wouldn't need a name. You don't need a name to call yourself, even though I know some people do speak to themselves. And they say, what's the matter with you, Adina, right? Or what's the matter with you, whoever it may be. But in essence, we don't really need a name. On the other hand, a name is critical for us to be able to communicate to each other, and we know that a name also touches the core. A person could be asleep. A person could even be in a faint state, in a comatose state, and you call their name, there's something that touches them very deeply. Because the name does associate to the way, as I said before, how the soul channels inside of you. So therefore, the Gematria, the number that associates with your name, is therefore also very significant. And Tanya, in Shar Yechid V'Amuna, in the second section of Tanya, chapter 1, the Baal Tad, the Rabbi Shneur Zalman of the Adi says that the number, the letters, the number of the numerology of a particular word gives you the number of energies that that word contains. So in a sense, when you say the word Yain 70, it's like 70 energies. And what's 70? So you can study, and those that are familiar with the number 70 know it has certain power. 70 is 10 times 7. It's the 7 faculties times 10, meaning their complete cycle. So with the number, you can begin to recognize different elements. For example, there are numbers we're very familiar with. Everyone knows Chai. Chai is one of the most famous ones, right? The Chai. What's Chai? So we all know Chai means life, but it's also number 18, which is many people will give donations in the number 18. 18, 36, 72, 1800. Because we want, with that number, we want to convey and we want to channel into our lives life. Chai for life. So Chai is one, as I said, one of the most famous ones. And there you have both, the number 18. Now, the question is, does number 18 connect to the word life? The answer is yes. When you study, again, Kabbalistic teachings, and again, this is not the place to go into all of this, the word 18, the number 18, adds up to things that give us life. So when you talk about numbers, as I said, the numbers have different words that share the same numerology, but you also have the meaning behind a number. Now, of course, the classic numbers that we know most of, especially when you talk about Judaism, are the number, like a number 1. So number 1 is the unity of God. Wherever you see an aleph, letter 1 or the number 1, you know that you're connecting to something that's unified. Whenever you see the number 2, you can rest assured you're identifying with diversity, because 2 immediately means there are 2 forces. And interesting, number 3, it always identifies with the concept of harmony, because 3 is the harmonizer. It takes energy 1, energy 2, which may conflict, and it reconciles between them. Kosev Ashlishi, the third verse, the third dimension, like a mediator or a translator. You have Hebrew, English, and you have a translator, number 3, that connects the two, like a bridge. So when you think of these numbers are easy to relate to, because easy to explain. It obviously gets more complicated when you get to larger numbers. So where do we find, for example, number 3? We have the 3 patriarchs. We have the 3 matzahs that we take in the Seder. We have the 4 cups of wine, which correspond to the 4 matriarchs. So you suddenly see, when you start thinking of these numbers, that these letters, Gimel, Daled, actually associate with other forces, not just with words, but with entities that are made up of number 3, number 4. Now, of course, 5, we have 5 fingers on our hand. Then we have both hands. We have 10. 10 is considered the complete number. And 10, you already have the 10 utterances which God created the world. You have the 10 commandments. And of course, number 7 is also very, very popular. 7 days of the week. So you see, when you start understanding the numerology, they start associating with all these things. Now, these are associated with single letters. Aleph is 1, Beis is 2, Gimel is 3, Dalet is 4, Hey is 5. You have 7 is the 7 days of the week. But when you start combining them, so then when you have a word that say, going back to Yayin, for example, so Yayin is Yud, Yud, Nun. So besides the numerical, numerical total of 70, it's the 70 made up of 10, 10, and 50. So the 10, 10, and 50 also have significance. Whereas, let's say the word Sod, secret, also adds up to 70, but it's made up of 60, 6, and 4. So you can see from this how this gets more and more complicated, which is why I'm sticking to the basics. And I know I've said it several times that it's complicated. I'm just saying it because it happens to be the fact. And I don't want anyone to go away thinking there's just some type of simplistic number thing. It actually gets deeper and deeper. And the deeper you go, the more you really learn about yourself and the things called by these names. Because names carry this type of power. Now, another qualification. I once discussed this with somebody, and they said to me, so does that mean when I date someone, I should find out what their name is? Add up the Gematria, add up my Gematria, and then see whether we're compatible. I said, absolutely not. I'll tell you what you do. You date that person, and you use your mind and heart to figure out whether that person is for you. And if you do indeed decide to get married, and after you get married, you come to me a week later, and then we'll add up the names, and we'll see how that works out. But you don't base the marriage on the names, as I said before. You base the marriage on the connection. And then guarantee that the names will also fit in. So it's important to not get too, let's call it sensationalist. You know, people love the exotic. They love the mysterious. And Gematrias are very intriguing, which is great. But let's not go overboard and realize it has to be part of a comprehensive way of looking at life and a responsible way of looking at life. You can't just say, you know, to take it overboard, as I said, okay, this is the Gematria, and I'm going to look for numbers, or wherever I go, I start seeing all these numbers. Because then it can get into almost the farcical and silly. Whereas in truth it's a very sacred part of our beings, a very sacred study, Gematria. And when you look in the Talmud, you'll find it's used all the time, but used in a very serious way, in a very insightful way, to help support a particular idea. As a matter of fact, when you look in the Pirkei Avot, in chapter 3, chapter 3, it talks there about different types of studies. So it says there's certain things we study, certain constellations and certain configurations, which are like considered fundamental. But then it says, comes to Gematria, it says, is like dessert. What does that mean? That it's an additional component that's not about, that dessert is not just about, so the core meal is the relationship. As I said before, first you have to relate to something. Then, as a dessert, or a so-called accessory or additional element in the meal, is a Gematria. So Gematria is a support to understanding the bigger picture. But it does carry weight, and it does carry power. As I said, it's the number of energies in the particular letters and the combination of letters in any particular word. So to use the words again of the Baal Tanya based on the Arizal and other classics, is that every name in Hebrew is the force that gives life and reveals the soul of the object called by that name. Now, we don't always see it, obviously. You know, for example, someone called the name Yehuda. Yehuda was one of the 12 tribes. Yehuda was the tribe that from there would derive the kings. Yehuda comes from the word acknowledgement. That was his personality. Does this mean every time you meet a person Yehuda, they're going to be that personality? You may not see it. It means they have it in their soul and they do have that power. But you can't simply just identify them as being that type of person. Sometimes you do see it very obviously. Sometimes a name is obvious. It's like so obvious that this person lives up to their name. Sometimes it's not so obvious. Now, if it's not obvious, doesn't mean it's not there, but we all have faculties in our souls that we have not accessed. So again, this is necessary to qualify, to understand that when we look at these things, it helps identify, but you need to have an expert to really be able to make a determination what meaning and what gematria, what does it ultimately add up to and what it means. Like for example, the word Yehuda also has, besides the Dalet, it has the 4 letters, Yud K, Vav K, and a Dalet. So that's why it hints to God's name, as do other names we find in the Torah, both men and women. So gematria, to sum up what I've said so far, is essentially a dimension in the energy of what objects and humans and people, that the part of the energy of what their letters of their name, the letters of their experience adds up to. Gematria adds a dimension, the numerical dimension, which is, as he puts in Tanya, he says, the number of energies that exist in that particular plane. And I gave a few examples with Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dal. Now, gematria has many other uses, and I'm going to talk about a few that have personal application besides what I've addressed so far. I used one class with yayin and sod, secret and wine. I want to use another example of a gematria that's classically used. One is called, one of them is Chava. The first woman in history, her name was Eve, in Hebrew Chava. So Chava is the gematria of Yutes, 19. 1 after Chai. 18 plus 1 is 9. That's Chava. Chava 8 plus 6 Vav is 14 plus 5, 19. So it explains why the number 19. Because she came in addition to Adam. Adam would be the symbol of life, and the woman is an additional element, so she's like a life plus 1, so to speak. As a matter of fact, it says Chava was called Chava, she's the mother of all life. So life would be Chai, 18. The mother of all life is 19. The mother that bears life. That's what Chava was called. Adam is the gematria of 45. Aleph is 1, Dalet is 4 is 5, and the Mem is 45. Remember I mentioned 45 before? The name Shema, Ma 45, it's the first configuration of God's name. But what do you think of Behema, which is the contrary? If Adam is a human, an animal in Hebrew is called Behema. What is the gematria of Behema? 52. Ban. So these different numerologies happen to also reflect on the nature of what a human being is. Because what is Ma? You know the word Ma in Hebrew, Ma means what? If you ever hear Chochma, Chochma, which means wisdom, is the power of what? Chochma is made up of 2 words, Koyach, Ma, the power of what? Because when you conceive of an idea, what's the first reaction you have? Wow, what was that? Like a flash. It's a what experience. It's a what experience because a flash of an idea, where did it come from? What symbolizes in Hasidic terminology bittul, meaning v'nochnu ma, what? You know, something that's defined, here's definition. When you say what is a wonder, wonder is connected to something that is beyond us. So it's like a transcendent experience. So Adam, the human being, and remember Adam is also a name for all humans. Not just for men, it's for women as well. Adam is the human race. It's the name Adam. The human being is essentially his real essence. The real essence of a human being is a what? Is a miracle, is a wonder. So the name Adam is that the human being is the only creature on earth that actually experiences transcendence. Animals follow the rules like clockwork. They survive and they are necessary for the natural balance of the world. But it's the human being that introduces the what, the wonder of it all, the awe, you can say, and the wonder of existence. So Adam is related to the word Ma. And I can go through a list of many different gematrias and their connection. I just wanted to give a few examples because these examples help us learn. I want to teach the methodology here. I'm not going to go through every possible gematria. It's a methodology that when you learn to master it, becomes a tremendous tool to understand that the inner workings of existence. Because listen, everybody knows today, and science makes it increasingly clear that we know that existence is multiple layers. What we see is not what you get. You know, you see the surface level. We know today, just like the sea, when you look at the ocean, you see a cover of the ocean bed. If we didn't have cameras and we never went underwater, we'd never know what's underneath it. But the ocean conceals everything that's underneath it. It's a whole world. The same thing is on Earth. Everything is multi-layered. We look at an object. You look at a table, a chair. What is it? Okay, so you could say this table is made out of wood. But what is wood made out of? Wood is made out of particular elements. Just like water, H2O, hydrogen and oxygen. But what are hydrogen and oxygen made of? They're made of molecules. The molecules in turn are made up of atoms. The atoms are made up of subatomic particles, subatomic. And how far down the rabbit hole can you go? No one knows. But one thing is clear, what you see on the surface is only an outer expression of what's inside. Take the human being. You look at somebody, you could see their body language, you could see their face and their reactions. But what's going on beneath the surface? Do we even know always what's going on beneath our own surface? So a person smiles, so you know there must be a good feeling going on inside, or maybe they're faking it. But let's, for argument's sake, you know there's a good feeling. But a good feeling doesn't have any way to show itself. Just like I said before about language. If you didn't smile, no one would ever know what you feel like. But the smile is not what causes a happy feeling. It's the happy feeling that causes the smile. Now, when you go deeper inside the human being, are we just bodies? Are we just skeletons? Are we just organs? The sum total of many organs? No, we know there's a personality. And we know we're not just a combination of ideas, mind, and heart, and emotions. We also have personalities. And the personality itself has a subconscious, or an unconscious, or a superconscious. And then you go further in, you can travel into the so-called the cellular structure. Then you can the DNA structure, all the way to the genetic matter within us, and being the DNA. I mean, I should have gone in a different order. Sorry, the DNA is all the way in the bottom, or all the way within. You'd go with the chromosomes, then the DNA, and before that the cells. And you know all that is really what defines a person. And all these are minuscule, microscopic forces that no one even can see. But that we know is what defines us today. So then we all look for instruments. How can we indeed, besides knowing how far does the rabbit hole go, we don't know. How indeed can we cut through the surface and tap the inner layers beneath? So Gematria is one of the ways. Words in general are the ways, as I said, the energy of a word. But particularly the Gematria, the numerical equivalent, is actually giving us a glimpse, a peek into what lies beneath the surface. So the surface would be the word, or your name, or the name of an object, or the name of an experience. And the numerology behind it would be a way of understanding what lies beneath the name, whether it's the number 70, or the number 18, or the number 19, or 45, or 1, 2, 3, or whatever combinations there are. So that's the way you have to look at Gematria. It's essentially an instrument, a tool, that lies there in its quiet way, a number. But when you start studying that number, you begin to recognize the forces that you would not see, the naked eye would not see. Let's take another example. What in Hebrew is the word for nature? So nature in Hebrew is teva. Okay, teva. Or if you say the nature, it's ha-teva. What is the Gematria of ha-teva? So hey is 5. Tes is 9, is 14. Beis is makes it 16, 2. And 16 plus the last letter, 70, is 86. That's the number. So the Kabbalists tell us that this number 86, is the equivalent of the word. And it's the word, one of God's names. Not the Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is 26. It's another name called Elokim. I mean, I'm not pronouncing it with a hey because we're not supposed to pronounce it that way, but Elokim is what? It's 5 letters. Aleph, 1. Lamed, 30. That's 31. Hey, 36 is 5. Yud, 46. And what's the last letter? 40. Mem. 86. Miracle, right? It's not a miracle. It says it in the holy books. That's how I know. So 86 and 86. So is there any connection? Now you may say not. Remember, the point is not that they're the same number. It's because there's a connection. That's why they're the same number. So the Pardes, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, explains that what is the meaning of God's name, Elohim? Why is it different than, let's say, the name Havaya? So he says because the divine, who's beyond everything, beyond any definition, manifested in two ways. The truth is there's 7 names of God, and they all have Gematrias, they all have significance. I'm just mentioning 2, Havaya and Elohim. 2 ways the divine that manifests in manifests. One is the divine that manifests within nature, the God of nature. That's Elohim. Whenever the word Elohim is used, you're talking about the divine as it relates to existence. Bereshis bara Elohim, the first 3 words of the Bible. In the beginning, which name is used? Elohim. Why not Havaya, Yud Ke Vav Ke, or other names? Because God is creating nature. And the rules of nature, the laws of nature, are the divine within nature. Now, just to qualify, this is not pantheism, Spinoza's pantheism, that God is nature and nature is God, as we'll learn in a moment, as we'll discuss in a moment. But God is the God that creates nature. So when you discover God within nature, which is like many scientists will say, it's the mind of God, it's the hand of God, that is the Elohim. Havaya, the Yud Ke Vav Ke, the Tetragrammaton, refers to the transcendent God, the God that's beyond nature. And that is a different number. So therefore nature, or the nature, is the same numerical number as Elohim, because it's exactly this, that's its significance. It's the divine hand, it's the artist as we see the artist through the art. Whereas Havaya is the artist, the artist is not defined by being an artist. We know an artist can be many other things. So there's a divine dimension that's not defined by his art. And that's why we, in Judaism, you see how much emphasis. Look at something that we say so often and most people don't even pay attention. Every blessing we make begins with which words? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu, Melech HaOlam. And then we continue for each blessing, lighting candles, eating bread, eating cake. But all we got, Baruch atah. What does it mean, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu? Blessed are you, Hashem Elokeinu. Hashem is the name Havaya, the 26th, and Elokeinu is the second name. What does this mean? Blessed are you, the Lord our God, the God our Lord. In English, it sounds redundant. But if you think of what I just said, it's not redundant at all. It's saying, blessed are you, the divine that's beyond nature, as you manifest in nature. And this is fundamental Jewish belief, that God is nature, but nature is not God. Which means that God also creates nature, but is not defined by nature. That the transcendent God that is beyond all of existence is united and one with the divine that is part of existence. So that's why we say Hashem Elokeinu. And then we say this many times. On Yom Kippur, the holiest moment on the holiest day, the end of Yom Kippur, what do we say? We first say Shema once, then we say Baruch Shem 3 times, and then we say Hashem Hu Elokim 7 times. I'll explain the numbers in a moment. What's this Hashem Elokim? If you don't know what the redundant, God is our God. What are you trying to say? God is God. That's it. You're saying that the transcendent God is one with the God within nature, which is the fundamental principle in Jewish thought, that we are not God, but God is part of us. And that we want to unite the 2 dimensions by saying that the God that is beyond all of existence connects with existence. It's basically transcendence connecting with our routines and our natural lives. Nature connecting with that which is beyond nature. Or to put it another way, the extraordinary within the ordinary. The supernatural within the natural. And interestingly, when we say the Shema, the most famous Jewish prayer, here you'll see how the Gematria really comes out. So we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu, again, Hashem Elokeinu. Same 2, the transcendent and the natural. And then you say Hashem Echad. And the emphasis is on the last word, Echad. 1. Now Echad, I mentioned before, is number 1. But echad, written out, is 1 plus 8. The ches is 9. Plus dalet is 4, 13. Which connects to many different 13s. There's a 13 divine attributes of compassion. 13 connected to bar mitzvah. There's many elements to 13. 13, the Kabbalists say there's 10 plus the 3, the triple heads of on top of the 10. But the main thing I want to emphasize is that the Talmud says that the 1 permeates the 8, which permeates the 4. And I'll explain. 1 is the oneness of the divine, which is a concept of unity. Today, physics is always in search of the unified field theory. Everything is one. To find the oneness that connects all laws and all phenomena. Ches is 7 plus 1, referring to the 7 heavens, the 7 atmospheres, and 1 is earth. And Dalet refers to the 4 directions, east, west, south, and north. And the goal is that you want to unite the Aleph, the 1, with the 8, with the heavens and earth, the diversity of existence, and the 4 different directions. This again is a form of connecting the divine unity with existence. So you see how the numbers all come into play again and again. There's nowhere where the numerology and the Gematrias don't have a role in understanding the deeper meaning behind words and behind experiences. And when you really, as I said, study this, it opens up a whole new dimension that you would never have imagined. Similar to what science does, or art for that matter. That's why we called it the art and science of Jewish numerology. Because what does science and art do? They show you, they reveal a deeper truth. They reveal something that we did not see beforehand. You know, for thousands of years or hundreds of years we may have experienced things, and what do scientists discover? They discover the forces that make things tick. They discover the forces that shape the realities we experience. And the same thing, artists do the same thing with art. You can say Gematria is a certain place where science meets art because there's a certain elegance to it that's very artistic in its eloquence and poetry, the poetry of numbers. As we know, mathematics is considered the pure science. The people call the poetry of numbers, the poetic numbers. And so therefore the numbers really play a role, and especially when you're familiar with music. And music is about numbers, and music is about a tempo and a certain pace, a certain, what's the word I'm looking for? Not beat, a certain scale, huh? Rhythm, but there's another word, the pace, there's the spaces between when you play notes. There's a word for it. Will come to me, gate maybe, not gate. Timing, whatever. Anybody play piano here? So there's another word, well, one of those words, anyway. The point is, rhythm is definitely a good word, but there's another, there's a word for the timing between notes. What is that called? Pause. Okay. The point is that all this comes down to a music and an art, and it's all about a certain type of rhythm and structure. And on the other side, there's also a science to it. The science of understanding the dynamics. You know, mathematics, some people call a science, some people call poetry. Depends which side you look at it. I mean, it really has both elements to it. The eloquence is definitely very poetic. But the same thing that really goes back to the numbers behind the words that we use and the names that we have and the things, what we call by name, which of course also begs, in a sense, like almost behooves us to want to know Hebrew better, because the better you know Hebrew, the better you really can use the Gematrias. In English, you don't quite have the ability to do so because words, as I just mentioned earlier, the Hebrew language is a metaphorical language. Every word is rich with meaning. In English, when you say the word table, table has a Latin root, but that's it. It's not multi-use. You can't use table in many different ways. And there's no number behind the word table, like what's the equivalent of the letter T? A, B, L, E. I mean, you can create a numerology, but there's nothing going on there because these are descriptive languages. All Latin languages are descriptive. Hebrew is a metaphorical language. It's actually a language of the soul.
Maybe you meant rhythm?
We mentioned rhythm already.
Duration? Okay.
It's fine. Yeah, it's one of those words. We got the idea. And Hebrew, on the other hand, is a metaphorical language, a language of feelings. I just read somewhere that how many letters are there in the English language that are conventionally used? You'd never believe the number. 250,000. I thought there'd be millions. How many letters, how many words in the English language? Usable words, not words that aren't used anymore. Around 250,000. Yeah. And Hebrew, 75,000. Which tells you that the Hebrew language is metaphorical, because one word in Hebrew requires a sentence in English and requires a paragraph in French, just for the record. I'm almost sure that's the number. I looked it up. You could look it up. Look up how many letters are in the English, not letters, words in the English language. Again, usable words. Not we're talking about, there's of course obscure words that no one ever uses anymore. You'd think there's a lot more, but that's what it is, something of that nature. You can check it out. I see she's Googling it there. Let's see. So language that expresses sentiments in that fashion obviously has much more concentrated power, both in the words, the letters, and above all, someone just wrote that the word I'm looking for is tempo. That was the word. Correct. Thank you, Angela. So you see, we're communicating with each other. Thanks. So what do we have here is that you have a poetry. You know, existence can be very monotonous, very boring, the routines that we go through, the monotonous routines. You get to work, and it wears us down, it drains us. But if you're able to recognize the music, the poetry, the eloquence within your experiences, everything changes. I've shared this story many times. I just love it. It's such a great story. The story goes like this. It's a story with the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov and Reb Chaim Rappaport, who once traveled on a mission of the Baal Shem Tov's to a certain location. He came back, and the Baal Shem Tov wanted to know. Baal Shem Tov was the great mystic, the founder of the Hasidic movement in the 18th century. And the Baal Shem Tov wanted to know, how did you travel? Which seemed to be trivial. Who really cares? This way, that way. He came back. It's all fine. He doesn't need directions anymore. So he went. He said, one night I stayed at an inn. Then he said, one night there was no inn, so I slept at the side of the road. I pitched a tent or whatever he did. In the morning I woke up. I washed my hands, said my prayers. And then afterwards, I sat down to eat something. There was a little brook and spring of water at the edge of the road. I went over, took some water, made a blessing, and drank the water. Baal Shem Tov jumped up and said the following words. He said, that brook of water, that spring of water, was waiting from the beginning of time for you to come and bless it. Why is it such an unbelievable story? It really, actually, it empowers me everywhere I go. I travel many places. And many times I come to a place and I remember Robert Frost's poem of traveling in the wood, and the road diverged. Right. And one path was the road most traveled on. And the other was a path less traveled on. He says, and I took the road less traveled, and that has made all the difference. There's something about going into the woods. You see a tread path, okay, more comfortable, more secure. Someone went here before you. But there's something adventurous and exciting and bold to go on a path that nobody has walked before. Because on one hand, yes, it's an unknown and it has its risks. But on the other hand, you're treading a new path. You're a pioneer. And when I remind myself of the story where I travel places, I sometimes say, maybe this place is waiting. And not in any arrogant way, actually a very humble way. Maybe it was waiting for me to come here and do something that no one ever did before. Make a blessing, bless somebody, say a kind word. And when you think of life that way, everything comes alive. Because then you walk down the street. You may be doing something that's routine, you're doing every day, but you're looking for the magic, you're looking for the enchantment, for the surprise, something unexpected. I always tell people when you travel, even if you have a business meeting and you're going for vacation, always be prepared for the unknown. Because the greatest things happen, when our human plans don't get in the way. So you go to a place, and if you have it all scheduled, listen, I have a business appointment, and that's all. The rest of the time I'll spend in the hotel watching something. But if you open yourself up to meet somebody, in the lobby, in the lunchroom, wherever it may be, in the dining hall or in the street or on the beach. Things happen, magic happens. And Gematria is part of that adventure, is the ability to look at things, not just at the surface, but to go beneath the surface and look at what is the number involved here? What is the music? What is the rhythm, the tempo, the different elements of the forces at work that are not so obvious? And when you do that, you start realizing there's a whole narrative and script beneath the surface. And that script is not written by us. It's some higher choreography. Now, we could either join and align ourselves to that choreography and then dance with it, or we can resist and just live on our surface level. And when any of that happens, say, hey, it's not part of my plan, and then lose these opportunities that really can change your life. So Gematria is more than just a play with numbers and words. It's really looking at your own name, other people's names, and really trying to understand what's the deeper meaning. It also makes you more introspective and makes you more sensitive, because you start looking at things not for what you see. You realize that what you see is not what you get, which of course was a big line used in the beginning of the computer generation, if you remember, 20 years ago, when they were talking about images on screens. Is it what you see, what you get? And you had to go to what was the initials. What you see is not what you get, WSY, whatever it was. Today, it's already common that you see what you get. But we should always remember we never see what we get. There's always more going on. There's always a deeper story. So Gematria in that sense is like an instrument, as I said, a tool to dig deeper and to recognize deeper meanings behind things and recognize nothing is as it seems, and helps us also create connections to experiences that in our lives that we would never really experience without going to that place. Like he said, that the entire world, beginning of time, was waiting for you to come there and achieve something. That's such a tremendous lesson, especially in our day and age. We have our gadgets, and we have our smartphones, and we have our mobile phones, and we have this thing and tablets. I mean, we're connected to the gazoo, we're over-connected and inundated and overloaded by information. Once upon a time, information was scarce, was a rare thing, and information was so valuable. Today, it's almost meaningless because it's everywhere, and you can't even make sense of what really matters between all the clutter. So we're overwhelmed with all of this. And with all that, in many ways, our lives have become even more robotic and more mechanical. Because that type of the enchantment of just having a conversation, eye-to-eye conversation with someone, and no one else is there, and there are no machines. I know it's ironic, I'm saying this as I speak, I'm saying it on Facebook, on YouTube, and all these technologies. So, I don't know, maybe the expression goes in the Talmud that sometimes they say the axe that cuts down the tree comes from the tree, because the handle of the axe is made of the wood of the tree. So maybe we use technology to challenge technology to be used for the right purpose. So I like to look at these machines simply as instruments, as channels, as platforms of conveying something that's beyond machines, conveying a heartful message, conveying the message of the numbers of our lives, the numbers of the story behind our lives. And though there's more to say about all of this, I thought this was a good, I would say introductory. I think it's more than introductory. I think I gave a good taste of it. I feel comfortable saying that. But stay tuned. We will talk about this more. But on a concluding note, I will say this. A Gematria is a gift given to us, one of the gifts we have, that help us probe, that help us explore, that help us dissect realities that we see and see them in a new light. Sometimes you look at something you're very familiar with, but then you look at it in a new light, in a new environment, and under other circumstances, and suddenly something emerges from it. That's really the secret to all healthy relationships. People you're accustomed to. People say, how could I be excited about someone I know for so many years? That's why marriages fail and so on. Well, the secret is to look at them always in a new light. It's like, think of it like a spectrum. Think of it like a crystal where you're trying to find the rainbow and always look for a new light. And maybe one of those new lights is the Gematria that helps us see things from a different perspective. It's the same thing, but you see a new dimension. That's how you keep things alive and dynamic. You keep them dynamic by looking to find dimensions you haven't seen before. So imagine a couple. They can be married 70 years. but they're constantly looking to find the more intimate and more another petal of the flower they haven't seen before, to come to discover something new. And Gematria helps. So maybe if your marriages need some little spice, maybe you should start looking into the number name now that you're ready together. Maybe look at the names that you have, find out what your Hebrew name is, find out the numerical equivalent, and then play with the numbers. And who knows, you may say, hey, wow, I never knew that about you. And I hope you find only good things, and I'm sure that you will. And it'll definitely give you a little more life, a little more time. And then there's always new dimensions of Gematrias, which I will be speaking about in the coming classes. Not necessarily next week, but in the coming months. So stay tuned. So may you enjoy your Gematria, enjoy your number, enjoy your numbers, I should say, the magic of the numbers, the poetry, the music. And thank you for all the words and that people have given me, the rhythm, the tempo. They're all very great words, because they all, if you think about them, the common denominator of all of them is vitality, passion, that it's alive. I remember a cardiologist was at this class, and he had a lot of aggravation in his life, a lot of problems. And he's always telling me, I wish I just had a day of respite where things were just calm, without all this ups and downs. So half jokingly I said to him, you mean like a flat line? He said, no, not a flat line. Because as you know, a cardiogram, if it's a flat line, it ain't a good sign. You want to have is a wave. That's rhythm. And a wave means it's moving. And movement means that you can't just stay static. I know we've created the art of the couch potato, the art of doing nothing. Some people feel they have a PhD. I've learned to do nothing and not feel guilty about it. It's not nothing to be proud of. We have to look at our lives as being something that's alive. And Gematria helps us look into the deeper dimensions. One of the powerful instruments and gifts to do so. So may we all enjoy such magical lives that every moment is extraordinary. Not because you're finding something new and extraordinary, because you see the extraordinary within the ordinary. You're digging deeper into what you already have. Thank you very much. And until next week, please stay in touch. You can email us. Check us out at meaningfullife.com. Email us at meaningfullife.com if you have any questions, comments, or in any way that we can be helpful in your magical journey. Have a good week. Thank you.